What's up, with my Nowstalgia? Dave here with a review of Barry Season 4. The final season of Barry is over. Series finale. I'm going to get into all that, as well as my thoughts on the series as a whole. The, four-season run, HBO comedy drama from Alec Berg and Bill Hader. So, before I get into spoilers, I'll just say that I liked Season 4, and more than anything, I'm just really impressed with the growth that this show has had. Where this show began is very different from where it ended, and I think the show had really a impressive level of growth at that, and just the dramatic development has been really quite impressive. And yeah, let's just get into it. What's up with Barry season 4? I think just going off that point, Barry began as like a Hollywood satire, right? You have this hitman character, veteran who goes to acting class to try and switch up his life. And it's like a really, I think, poignant like satirization, lampooning of like Hollywood culture and like acting class and things like that. And the double life of the hitman trying to become an actor, become a real person, and like where the show went from there, which it was at its funniest at that time, and over the course of season 1 and 2 playing that out, and then really with season 3 and 4 getting incredibly dark, um, really a full-on drama at this point. It really should not be running the comedy Emmy category for this final season. That would be ridiculous. Um, and it's really about like these characters' psyches and the growth that they have as people, and the I think the comment that the show is presenting is just changed quite a bit. And I think it's not a show that's nearly as fun to watch as it once was, because again, it's quite dark. There's brief moments of graphic violence. We got that in the finale with the shootout between Fuchs and Hank's people, but really, I think the journey that like the core characters go on in their lives and in their own heads in terms of how they rationalize things, that's really what this show was about. And you would not have seen that coming with season 1. And really, I think hats off to Berg and Bill Hader, who had a strong, clear vision for this series and set out to do a very specific thing with how they wrapped up Barry. And definitely one of the best, HBO shows of the last, 5 plus years. Um, I think with season 3 for me, I wasn't quite as high on it as like the early seasons, and I think perhaps it was just that transition point. But the show gets quite like metaphysical in season 3, which again is something you would not have seen coming in the early seasons. And season 4 makes, I think, a really specific choice in the middle part of the season, which is this time jump, really I believe for the first time, like a time skip forward, as Barry and Sally are on the lam after Barry breaks out of prison, and then you realize they have a kid and they're living really in the middle of nowhere in the Midwest, I assume, and living these really private, like specific lives as they try and raise this kid in solitude. And you know, it presents itself as like being like a dream or like a fugue state of some kind, based off what we had seen, like on the beach in season 3. And you watch like the subsequent episodes and you realize, actually, no, that was just a straight up time skip. That really happened. It was definitely a choice, I think, to do that and to give Barry and Sally a child. Um, and I think that's one of the weaker parts of season 4 and the wrap up of this series is the kid, John, who, at the very end, there's a further time skip and you see John aged up a bit, played by Jada Martell. And you watch this hokey Warner Brothers, we assume, film about the Barry and Gene Cousineau story, and like John accepting what the public has accepted as really happened in this story. And it's like a really hokey film that's a funny juxtaposition of like how Barry was, because Barry is not a hokey show. Um, but I don't know if that moment completely lands, because we don't spend a whole lot of time with John. I think thematically it's a nice connection to how other characters are going, where John's like seeing this and rationalizing to himself that his dad wasn't actually the vile human that he might have thought he was, because that's not what everyone else thinks. Barry uh, didn't go down that road in the court of public opinion. Funny enough, but yeah, I think that was kind of an interesting thing that don't necessarily landed, which is the kid. I think the Sally stuff in the time skip is really impressive, and also it's like a really like makes you have like no remaining doubt about like the deranged nature that Barry has gone down, where he will listen to like religious podcasts to rationalize his horrible decisions and why he's a bad person and things like that. Like that's all incongruous. And I think the best thing about the time skip actually is what happens with Hank and the NoHo Hank character. That character development, that character growth is perhaps the signature achievement of Barry as a series. Honestly, like Anthony Kerrigan, amazing performance across 4 seasons. But when you first meet NoHo Hank, it's a comic relief character. This funny part of the Chechen mob. And at one point in the story making process, Hank was supposed to die, and that was all fine and good. But you would not have expected to have this really dramatic path with NoHo Hank, and seeing him become successful, become straight, in the eyes of the law, more or less, in the time skip, and yet him having this really debilitating like pain because of what he had to do to achieve that. That just is not something I would have ever seen coming with Barry, and that's a really impressive stuff earlier in the season where Barry betrays Cristobal and kills all of their men in the sand silo and gets back in with the Chechens with the Colombians kind of neutralized. And then Hank, knowing that Cristobal needs to stay with him, otherwise he'll be taken out, and like the pain that he feels when his love rejects him for what he has done. And then of course Cristobal gets whacked as a result. Like Hank is broken at that point, and like that's kind of what the show is about. It's about broken people. As Sally, her despair is kind of continuous throughout the seasons 3 and 4, but of course in season 3 she brought a lot of that on herself in terms of her, the way she moved in the industry and how she was a really selfish and arrogant person. And you kind of see that manifested again in season 4, where she's kind of being a coach for someone who's clearly a worse actor than her, but like a more conventionally attractive woman. And like you can see Sally's um, the longing she has that of what she could have had in the industry. I really liked how that went. Fuchs also has quite the journey on this show. Again, starts out as the handler of Barry the Hitman at the beginning of the show and kind of a surrogate father figure. And, I think where that goes, season 3 is kind of out of the picture, like away. And then I think his season 4 stuff's really fun, right? Like Fuchs being the Raven, this alter ego criminal mastermind identity he's put on himself, and then actually manifesting that in prison by kind of toughening out the line of questioning that's been put on him when the FBI, I believe, was trying to ascertain stuff that Fuchs really didn't know. And Fuchs kind of makes himself into the Raven, faked it until he made it, basically. And then, against all odds, you have this like tete-a-tete with Hank towards the end, but Fuchs, learning that Barry had a kid, kind of snaps back to what semblance of a heart he once had, realizing that he wronged Barry and fucked him up for years back in the day, diving on John to save Barry's kid and shepherding Barry's kid back to Barry. It's kind of a full circle moment. Now, when I first saw that, I thought like Fuchs in his fucked up mind was like, oh, I can make a new Barry. I thought that's actually where he was going with it, but actually I liked how it went. Obviously, Hank dies in that shootout because Hank just was unwilling to admit what he had done, admit how painful that was to Fuchs, what he had done to Cristobal, and rather would go out in a blaze of glory than acknowledge what he had done. And like that, like I think theme of denial was like really present in like the back half of this season. Again, like John, Barry's Sally's son, him watching the movie, you understand that denial theme, but we don't necessarily have enough time with him to have that necessarily resonate. But I think like the big shock of the finale, watching Barry really for the first time come to terms with how fucked up he is, how he was, and he cannot rationalize and deny things to himself any further, he's going to turn himself in and clear Gene Cousineau's name in the process. And yet, Gene um, just decides that he'd rather kill Barry, kill the one who killed his girlfriend, Janice, way back at the end of season 1. And in the process, Gene goes to jail, life in prison as a result for killing Barry, and the law believes he killed Janice, even though it was Barry. And Gene had a chance, had his own out, but he also just couldn't. He couldn't go down that road. It's funny, like all the characters in Barry are bad for one reason or another. It's very similar to Succession, I guess. Watching these final seasons back to back over the last 2 months has been quite the ride for sure. Barry definitely a lot less lacking on the laughs than Succession. That's obvious, but yeah, I think the Gene stuff. When a few episodes back in season 4, you think, oh, Gene has a way back in after being hiding, but like I think perhaps that can be like a bit of like a point of contention for like some viewers, which is how things kind of went with Gene. Like if you think about it, like the FBI and Jim Moss being like kind of duped into just going down the wrong road and having the wrong conclusion about things. Gene's son the same way, and I don't know, like there was a lot of like evidence earlier in the show's run about Barry's role as a criminal. Like there were other investigations into him just last season. So it's a bit neat and tidy how all things went. I think we can yada yada that. The one thing that jumped out to me in the moment, and I saw some other people noting this as well, was that Jim Moss was like really lax in how he had Barry like tied up in his home after tracking him down at the back half of this season. Like Barry just gets to escape, and Jim Moss didn't seem as concerned about that. Again, the person who killed his, a daughter. Even if he believes Cousineau coaxed him to do it, this was still the actual murderer, right, Barry, and that felt a bit incongruous, I suppose. But yeah, I think overall, man, like Barry is a show that I think absolutely should be celebrated just for what it achieved and what it grew into over the course of 4 seasons. This is definitely a show that could have continued to run for a long time, especially in its earlier iteration. Like, is the hitman living the double life going to be found out? Tune in next week and let's see. Like, this could have been a much simpler but still satisfying type of show than it ended up being. But I think Hader has openly said that he has like real aspirations to be a director, and like this was kind of his way in to doing that, being a film director specifically, and him being able to be the creative force behind this show, directing you know the back half of season 3, all of season 4, like just kind of being that talent and showing the industry what he can do and what he's interested in. It's really impressive. So I'll be really interested to see where this competes in the Emmys. Like this needs to be run in drama. Like there's funny stuff, but I think the funnier stuff now in Barry in season 4 was like watching Barry walk into Walmart and buy a bunch of machine guns and then storm out through like the toy aisle. Like that's the kind of humor it was. But like Hank was not nearly as funny as he once was in season 1. This I don't think you can good conscience call this a comedy, but because it's a half-hour runtime, the old like definitions of how we talked about in classified TV almost position this as a comedy. And I hope those like stringent definitions don't do that to this show. That being said, like I think if you put Barry up against most comedies that are out, like it's better than those shows. Like I think Barry versus The Bear versus Abbott Elementary would be an interesting battle, right? But Barry should be running drama, if you ask me. We'll see what happens later this fall when when that goes down, and I'll be talking about the Emmys when they come up. But let me know, how'd you feel about Barry? What did you feel about this growth, season 1 to season 4? Did you like it? Did you like an earlier version of the show more? Did you like how this wrapped up? And for more TV reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.